in the Brisa that the findings of a woman and all her earnings go to her husband, and this is an exchange because he provides her with food, and anything she inherits while they are married, it belongs to her. But because he puts in all the effort, so he gets the dividends. And then the Mishnah will come back to the next part of the Mishnah soon. So we're up to here the Gemara on the bottom of the page, 2 lines from the bottom. So Tani Tana Kamei de Rabba. The student was saying over a Gemara before Rabba, Brisa before Rabba, and this is what the Brisa said: Metzias Isha la'atzma, not like our Mishnah, but rather that what a woman finds belongs to herself, not to her husband. And Rabbi Akiva says l'bayla, no, it goes to the husband. Amalei, Rabba says, I find that difficult to believe. Rabbi Akiva says that the findings go to the husband. Why is that? Because we learned before a whole discussion about there's the earnings that the husband that she makes, and then there's the excess over above that. It's called a hadafa, and we had an argument where the hadafa went to the husband or it goes to her. So Rava says, if the hadafa, this is what he's going to say, if the hadafa konja bekiv ends up with the husband, if the hadafa of the woman goes to her, then surely the metzia goes to her. And why is that surely? Because hadafa, it makes sense in a way. Hadafa is basically if she has to do some work for her husband and she makes extra money. So you can argue that it's tagged to the work that she's doing, so therefore it should all go to the husband. The metzia is something totally independent of that. So if you're telling me the hadafa, according to Rabbi Akiva, ends up with her, then surely the metzia should end up with her. Why in the world Rabbi Akiva say the metzia goes to the husband? So Rabbi found that difficult to believe, as the Gemara says. Amalei, so Rabbi says on the bottom of the page, Hashda now, Mahadafa, when it comes to the Maasiyadeh, when she earns money and there's extra, we say, Rabbi Akiva says, Le'atzma, it belongs to her, even though in logic you might argue that it belongs to her husband. So metzia also like koshkein. Surely her findings that have totally unrelated to her earnings surely should belong to her. How could Rabbi Akiva say that it goes to her husband? The way you're quoting the Brisa doesn't make sense. How do I know Rabbi Akiva says that? Now we learned in the Mishnah. If a woman says, we had this previously, koinim, I'm going to ban you because I'm consecrating it, I'm banning you. Anything that I earn, I ban that you shouldn't have any benefit from it. According to Tanakama, there's no reason at all to annul that vow because it's meaningless, because it's not hers to ban. Everything that she earns goes to the husband. However, Rabbi Akiva says, Yafeh. Rabbi Akiva says, yes, we should. The husband should annul the vow. And why is that? It doesn't affect him. It might. What happens if she makes extra? We learned before she has to make 5, the value of wool, 5 sloy, weight of 5 sloy. What happens if she makes more than that? And that extra actually belongs to her. And that extra belongs to her. And therefore, he should annul that vow because she's saying you can't have any benefit from it. So he should annul that vow. So we see clearly Rabbi Akiva holds that the extra that she makes goes to her. Then surely the metzia, which is totally unrelated to any earning, surely should go to her. Elohim says, you're right. Eifach. Swap the opinions around in the Brisa. He quoted it wrong. That Rabbi Akiva says that it goes to her, and it's the Tanakama says it goes to the husband. Now what? Mitzias Isha L'Bayla, that what the Tanakama says it goes to the husband, Rabbi Akiva says it goes to her. Says the Gemara, I'm not so happy yet. Ki also Ravin, when Rabbi Yechon had a few students that traveled from Israel to Babel and report what Rabbi Yechon said, Ravin, Ravdimi. So when Ravin came, he came and said the name of Rabbi Yechon as follows. For example, she didn't have to work really any extra. She was just very talented. And what an ordinary person could do in a week, she could do in 3 days. So therefore, she was able to, in that time, produce more than anybody else. That's called a hadafa, without any extra effort on her part. Kuli Amalaplik, that everyone agrees, the Baal Havit, everything goes to the husband. Because she didn't have to exert herself, everything goes to the husband. Ki pligi, the argument that the Kamar Rabbi Akiva is, bahadafa shadei chak. Let's say that she had to work harder, overtime. She had to work extra hours. So then that's called hadafa deit chak. It's not just came to her easy. She had to work extra. That extra that she
is
put
what she giving him exertion, or is it the value?
It's excess. It is excess, which means it's not really
But
entitled
excess
to it.
exertion or excess value?
That's what we're saying here. That if this excess value came via excess exertion, then maybe it's not bound to the husband at all. She made her own effort for herself. Or do we say no? It's all considered one thing. So keep pligi. The argument Tanakama Kiva is this very point. Where she had to exert herself. Tanakama holds in this case Lebaila. The Tanakama holds that this extra also goes to husband, even if she had to exert herself, goes to husband. And Rabbi Kiva says no, that extra, because she exerted herself and it's beyond what normally goes to the husband, then la'atzma, she's entitled to herself. So the Gemara thinks right now that metzia is like an extra effort. It's like, sorry, Gemara right now thinks that metzia is not, you're walking down the street and suddenly you find something. So therefore it's like extra, not through exertion. So in that case, everyone agrees that it goes to the husband. So what do you mean? How can Mitzia Rabbi Kiva say it goes to herself? Says the Gemara, Papa says, you comparing, and this is interesting, Papa says, you think that Mitzia is generally people walking down the street and suddenly they chance upon something. No, there are people who are actually fossicking out there looking. You ever go to the beach and you see people walking around with these metal detectors looking for rings or other things that they can find. Amar Papa Mitziyasa. We compare Metzia kahadofe sha'ayidat chakami. That Metzia is actually through an extra exertion. And Rashi gives a few examples of extra exertion. He says, if you're looking for fish, people who the water brings fish onto the sand, and then the water recedes and the fish sometimes stay, and you can catch those fish. You have to go look for them. You don't just happen to chance upon them. Then he brings an example, you're looking for a deer with a broken leg, so it's easy to catch up to. Or looking for coins in the ground, you have to stand there. You have to deliberately search for them. So that's called extra exertion. Says the Gemara, okay. So the Gemara says, according to Rabbi Akiva, that says that extra exertion still goes to her. What about Osasa loy extra exertion? But at the end of the day, it goes to her. What about Asa Loshtayim bebasachas? What about, let's say she can multitask and she did two in one go. Or Mahu, what's it then? Does the second thing also go to the husband or not? Or Boy Ravina, what about with those Shaloisha, three, she's multitasking that she can do three Oidalad or four bevasachas, four in one go. And Rashi gives an example. She's a security guard watching over, let's say, melon, cucumbers, whatever it is. She's also able to spin while she's watching, it's like knitting. So while she's watching, they're spinning over their flax. And at the same time, she's teaching women how to sing. She knows how to sing. And she's warming up eggs in her bosom at the same time. And Rashi says they used to warm up eggs from different worms to take out the thread or the silk. And you just sit there and they're doing four things at the same time. Is that considered al yidei chak? Because anything you do more than one task is already considered al yidei chak, and therefore that goes to her, or not? Because since she's capable of multitasking, it's not al yidei chak, and it goes to the husband. Teku, it is a question. And the homachek rishonim of the halacha of Akiva or the halacha of Tanakam.
What happens the other way? What happens if she's very slow?
She's in trouble. But we learned before already, it's all proportional. So for example, if she does the other works, there's 7 jobs that she had, right? And that's why she forfeits seven dinarim, one for each job. If she has other jobs, so if she's doing other tasks, then she has to work less for her husband. Remember, it's one package deal. It's not like each one in isolation. So she might not be good at this, but she'll be good at something else. You're always good at something. Now, the next part of the Mishnah was if a woman was hurt, we learned 5 different kinds of payments you have to make. You have to pay nezek, tsar, ripui, sheves, abaishis. So you have to pay ripui, which is medical bills, and sheves, which is the fact that she's now unemployed. Those 2 payments go directly to the husband because he's the one who pays all the medical bills, and he's the one who provides for her, and all her earnings go to him. So therefore, he's the one who got the loss. So it comes to those 2 payments of ripui and sheves, that goes directly to the husband. When it comes to tsar, it's exclusively her pain, and therefore, sorry, 1 second. I just realized I wasn't there. When it comes to when it comes to tsar and it's her pain. So there, next time, please say something if you don't see me. When it comes to tsar, it is actually her pain exclusively, so she gets all she's entitled to the money. When it comes to shame and it comes to the actual nezek, so her value has been devalued, then whose is it? So the Tanakhama said it goes to her. Rabbi Yehuda said it's shared between the two. 2/3 to her and 1/3 to him if it's discreet, if it's exposed, and 2/3 to him because he feels the shame as well, and so on. So the Gemara asks this concept that you share the shame, the Gemara finds a little bit difficult to comprehend. Says the Gemara. When it comes to shame, when it comes to devaluation, Reb Chanan Basama says, so there's you're introducing a new idea here, that one person was shamed and somebody else who also was bothered by it, they also get some compensation. So what happens if you insulted the horse of your friend? So the owner of this horse now is embarrassed. You have to pay him money for shame. You embarrass the horse. You're introducing an idea that someone else also
feels how do you embarrass a horse? Shame. What do you say?
Sorry?
You say to the horse, you're ugly. How do you embarrass a horse?
Let's say it's a racing horse, and you say you can't even walk 2 feet. You can't even walk. You expect to run. You make some kind of derogatory comment. Or
but you're embarrassing the owner, not the horse.
So the Gemara says, what are you asking here? The horse doesn't have, over here, the shame is shared. The woman, is shamed and passed on to the husband. But here, the horse, is the horse shaykh to shame at all? There's no shame by a horse. Let's say if somebody spat on your clothing, so you're embarrassed. So do you have to give the owner of the clothes money because the person who's wearing the clothes is embarrassed? No, as you said, by a horse, it's not shaykh shame at all. But here, the person is wearing the clothes and is embarrassed. You have to pay him, even though you didn't embarrass the person directly, you embarrass his clothing by spitting them. Maybe Taka, who said no? But now we learned as follows. Rokak, what happens? We will learn Babakama. Rokak, somebody spat the higia by and the spit landed on your face or something. Or upara roisha isha. You're walking down the street and you pulled off the wig, the shaitel of a woman, and you exposed the hair. In other words, you shamed them in public. The heavy talisa mimenu, you took off somebody's coat and you shamed them. A substantial penalty, you have to pay 400 zuz. 400 zuz. But Omar, we actually had this story, remember, right in Brachas, when this woman's walking around in red, so this Amoida came and pulled her clothes off, and they made him pay a penalty of 400. Papa said,
where do they get 400 zuz from? Is that a
penalty?
Yeah, but it's a penalty. Where's it derived from?
The Bezin arbitrarily decided they can decide whatever they want. This is what they say. You made 400 zuz, whatever the value is, because this is terrible behavior.
What page are we on? Sorry.
Somebody.
66A2.
What is it?
66A2, just above the Mishnah.
Square. Thank you.
Papa said, Loi shanu ela boy. This idea that spit landing on the person you have to pay for embarrassing him is only if it landed directly on the person himself. Avo the big doy if it landed on his clothing, potter. So, but according to you, introducing the idea that one thing can be a thing and the other person gets the money for the shame, so the same thing should apply here. So the Gemara is very simple. The big doy, generally speaking, if somebody spat on your clothing, less lezalusa, it's not really humiliating. But ishtai zelusa, when your wife was affected by this person and they brought shame up this woman, it affects him as well. According to this, biash ani ben tovim. So what happens? A rich family or a very distinguished family, they have one member of the family who's poor. So if somebody embarrassed that poor member of the family, the entire family feels it. The entire family feels it. Why do they feel it? Because really, they are sort of being reminded that you have a nephew or cousin, whatever it is, that is poor and you guys are rich and nobody's helping him out. So you're embarrassing the whole family because they feel responsible for this young man. He cannot take care of himself. So you should have to pay them. You have to pay every member of the family. The Gemara says a very important thing. Hasam lav gufayu, even though it's their cousin, their nephew, everything else, it's not their own self. Hacha ishtoi gufa have. Your wife, we have the expression ishtoi gufa. Your wife is exactly like you are yourself. And therefore, ishtoi gufa, and that's why when your wife's shame is your shame. And that's a Yehudim Seir. And against the Machlek is Allah Seir or not. Interesting, there's a Magen Avraham Shulchan Aruch that talks about benching. How can a woman say Va'al brischa in benching, Va'al brischa shechasamta bifsareinu, the bris that you've sealed on our flesh when a woman doesn't have a bris? So how can you say that? So the Magen Avraham brings an interesting answer. Some say because we have the Gemara that ishta kim hiladami, that a woman is like she's circumcised, she's born like she's born circumcised. But the Magen Avraham says because ishta kigufay, that a husband and wife, literally, like this mother right here, are one and the same. So the wife can actually say bifsareinu, in our flesh.
And the question goes, how can she say if she's not married?
Oh, so the Machzor Shekel, very good. The Magen Avraham's grandson asked the question, what about a girl who's not married yet? So he says a very interesting thing. He said that every person is born married. Just because you don't know your husband is yet, doesn't mean that you're not married yet. There's somebody out there meant for you, Bashert, and therefore every girl can say Bif Sareinu. Interesting. Okay, Mishnah. Now this parak talks about the idea of a dowry. We already had dowry before, and the dowry, what the woman brings into the marriage, and so on and so forth. So what happens? And we also had a whole discussion if they only got engaged and then she died, is he still entitled to the dowry or not? Generally, we said that's only if they depend, we want them to consummate the marriage. At least when he gives her things, it's only when they're consummated, when the mechutin gives it, maybe he's happy that she got engaged. Okay, so the father-in-law promised the son-in-law X amount. The mace chasonai. And then the son-in-law died. So what's the din? Unfortunately, we learned Yavamis. You go to Yavam. And the Yavam now says, well, whatever you promised to my brother, my late brother, I want you to give it to me. The father can say, your brother, I'm very happy to give you. He was Bashek. You are a default position. I'm actually giving you it all. And he has a right to say that. He's not bound by this transaction to pass it on to the brother-in-law. Now, this is the next part of the mission is like this. When you what do you call it? When you write in a ksuva, an amount that she brings into the marriage, and then if they get divorced, or if he predeceases her, she takes back that amount that she brought into the ksuva. So we're going to learn here, depends if it's money or if it's actual articles. If it's money, the husband will take the money and use it in business. So therefore, if they divorce or he passes away, he has to pay her a substantial increase to what she brought in because she enabled him to do business. But since
isn't that ribbis?
It's not called ribbis because since the chiyuv doesn't start until the moment he died, and then you pay the full amount. So in other words, whatever you're writing in the ksuva, which he doesn't owe yet, you're writing in the ksuva 50% more than whatever she brought in. She brought in $1,000, you're writing $1,500, but there's no chiyuv right now. And the moment he died, the chiyuv starts, and the chiyuv is $1,500. So it's not like the whole idea of ribbis is for the time that I'm allowing you to use the money. But here, there's no chiyuv at all. For example, if she passes away first, he owes nothing. Okay, so that's if you brought in money. If you brought in articles, two things can happen. Either they depreciate in value, or they inflate the figures to make it look like she is make it more prestigious, the whole thing. So therefore, when it comes to articles, it's the other way around. We deduct. If she actually brought in $1,000 worth of article, we write the sort of $800. We deduct by a fifth because we will say that it depreciated over time, or we'll say it was not really $1,000. It was really only 800, but they inflated the figure. But when you inflate something, it has to be, you can't go crazy.
And the same caretaker can appreciate too.
Metalclin don't appreciate generally, only if it's a collector's item. Okay, so says the Mishnah further. Pascal Hachel, she wrote that she made up that we're going to give you $1,000, 1,000 dinarim. Who paisi connected chamish esem mana? He puts into the ksuva that I'm going to give you 1,500 back because he has the right to use that money. Ukeneged hashum u'poisek pachas chemish. But if against an assessment on metaltalin and portal items, you deduct a fifth. So the $1,000 of items she said you brought in, and they assessed it for $1,000, we're going to write 800 because of depreciation, or because it was done in the family of the kala and they inflated the figures. What happens if shum b'mana v'shavim mana? What happens? She brought in $100. It was actually worth $100. It wasn't an inflated figure at all. Then ain't elamana. Then he has to write in the ksuba. If she brought it in and it was actually assessed by whatever external authority, third party, and it was taka worth the full amount, then you write what do you call it? You write the full amount.
But you're going to know at that time what it's worth.
Sorry.
You're not going to know what it's worth at the time of writing the ksuba.
Yeah, so we're talking about there's two kinds of metaltalin. There's metaltalin that was used and metaltalin that was not used. It's just there. We're talking about metaltalin that was not really used, so therefore the depreciation is not really. It's wear and tear. There's the depreciation. We're talking about depreciation, wear and tear, but it's not really used. It's more that they inflated the figure. But because in this case over here, she brought it to him and she said, "You assess it." And when they assessed it, it was talking worth the full money. And he wants to say, well, I should put in there, it's worth only, 4/5 of that. No, you put in the full value because there's no inflated value here. Then he continues. Shun b'mana, let's say they assessed it in her place for a mana, then they said that she has to now give, if they wrote in the ksuba, it's worth 100, so you have to give now, because it's 4/5, she has to give now more. So to give 125. The way you know how the Gemara reckons 4/5 is not the way we reckon 4/5. It's an external, it's basically a quarter that you add on the other end. So it's 125. So he said that she has to give shloishes v'echad seller. Each seller is worth 4 more. So that's 4 times 30 is 120. For 31 is 124. And then v'dinas make 125. 125. If she brought in, let's say, $400, he sent us chamesh meis. If he wrote in the ksuba, you're going to bring in $400, so she has to actually bring $500 because in her house, when they assess it, they always inflate it by a fifth, or a quarter of internal, which is a fifth of the external. So whatever the chassan writes, he always writes less than a fifth. So the Mishnah is sort of repeating itself 4 times. And the Gemara is going to ask why. So we learned, ain't tzarich lemer. When we said that the father-in-law is not bound at all by the yavam, ain't tzarich lemer rishon talmid chacham v'shem marja. I have to tell you, the first guy was a talmid chacham, the actual son-in-law. And the brother-in-law was an Amoritz. Of course, the father-in-law would say, look, I wanted my daughter to marry Talmid Chacham, and I was prepared to give a certain amount of money, but not for you. Even if the son-in-law was an Amoritz, and the brother-in-law is a Talmid Chacham, nevertheless, it's within the rights of the father-in-law. You can say, I'm more than happy to give to your brother, but not to you. Pascha lahachnis lo eladiner. So it repeats itself 4 times. So the Gemara hainu reisha. What's going on? It repeats itself all the time. So the Gemara says Tana is giving you different examples. It's talking about, let's say we devalue by a fifth. It's giving you different examples, and that is 1,000 and 500 and 100. Shuma rabba uktani shuma zota. Zutas, a large amount and a small amount. It says they talk about 1,000 dinarim, and then you devalue by a fifth. That's a very large amount. And then it tells you in the case if you brought in $100, and again that what do you call it? And she has to give 135. Why does it talk about both these cases? Because we would have thought that maybe when it's a small amount of money, they inflate it more because they're embarrassed. It's a small amount of money. So it tells you, I don't care if it's a large amount, a small amount. You always work the same way. Then Tana Shuma Dedei, Tana Shuna Deda. When it says the chassan wrote in the ksuva an amount that he is, and then we say that she has to now bring in another fifth more, we're talking about that Shuma Dedei, when he assesses, so she brought it to him before they actually they assessed it, and he assessed it for $500. So then he has to write That was if it was assessed before the ksuba. So then in the ksuba he has to write 400 because that was inflated. And then the Shuma Didah. And then there's a case where they wrote the ksuba before they assessed it. The first case was Shima Didah. First he wrote in the ksuba an amount, and now she's bringing it over. So we say you have to inflate it by a fifth. He wrote 400, you have to give 500 according to your estimates. And the second amount is that first she brings it, and then afterwards you write the ksuba. That's called Shuma Didah. So there again, she brings an amount, and then he writes the ksuba a fifth less. Okay, we cover all bases. Mishnah. Paska lahachnis like ksafi. Let's say that she made up to bring in money that he can use straight away.
Where is it? Which Mishnah is it? Noon what?
Samach Vav Beis. The Mishnah 7 lines at the top.
66B1.
Yeah. We just learned before that if she brings in $1,000, you have to pay back $1,500. So the Mishnah continues. Paska lahachnis like Safi. She made up to bring in money. Sela, she brings in a sela which is 4 zuzim, 4 dinarim. Nasa shisha dinarim. In the ksuva, he has to write that I'm giving back 6 dinarim. In other words, 50% more. Hachasen. Now we go further. The chasen. Mikabel olav asara dinarim lekupe l'chamana mana. For every mana that she brings into the marriage, he has to give her 10% of that to cover her fragrances and spices and perfume and all that. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel said it's also true. Now it doesn't explain in the Mishnah that 10% is that weekly, monthly, daily, what's going on. And Rav Shimon ben Gamliel says, Hakol timining hamadina. Rav Shimon says you follow whatever the custom of that country is, what a woman wears, that's what you do. So the Gemara, the first thing the Gemara asks, this Mishnah repeats what we said in the previous Mishnah. In the previous Mishnah said bring $1,000, you write 1,500. And here in the seller, you write 6 dinars. So it's the same principle. Is it exactly the same principle as in the previous Mishnah? It says in Gemara, Tana iska rabba, the Tana iska zuta. In the previous Mishnah, it talked about a big amount of money that she brought in, $1,000. And this Mishnah, it talks about a small amount of money. He brought in 1 seller, which is 4 dinarim. And we need both. We need both. The Tanis Karabi only know if she brought us a substantial amount of money, the Nafish Avacha, there's plenty of profit, so therefore he has to write it 50% more. If he only has 1 seller to work with, the Zuta Avacha, the profits are far less. A Malay, you would think he doesn't have to pay back 50% extra. We need that. The Iashmin Iska Zuta, if you only knew the Iska Zuta, I would say the Zuta is in a very small expenses and he has a very small responsibility. Aval Iska Naba, when you deal with a lot of money, the Nufis, there's a lot of expenses and he's also responsible for it. A Malay, maybe he doesn't have to give it back such a large amount. Therefore, you need to be told about both cases. Then the Mishnah continues. Hachasen, the chasen, mikabel olav asara dinar lekupa. The chasen accepts upon himself 10 dinar for the, what you said before, for the fragrances, 10% of what she brings in. My kupa, first of all, what's this kupa? All it says is a box. What's this box? We're talking about these fragrances. This is only said in Yerushalayim, because in Yerushalayim, the women need to put on a lot of fragrances.
Does the husband buy the fragrances?
Sorry, the husband has to give her a special stipend so that you should be able to.
Then why is he paying extra? If he's paying for the fragrances, why is he paying extra?
He's paying extra because it's only 10%. He's using the rest of the money. And it's not from her money that he's taking. He's supposed to put his own money in. The money that she brought in, he's using all of that for a business deal. But in return, he has to give something to her. He has to give her the equivalent of 10% so that she can cover herself properly. Teisha says, we learned already in the Gemara that in Shalayim, the Torah was that strong that you can smell it all the way to Yerichai. And the women didn't have to put on, perfume and all that. So what's the saying? Only in Shalayim they did that. So Teisha says, we're not really talking about perfume. We're talking about they used to put on all kinds of ointments to make their flesh glisten, to remove their hair, and to straighten out all the folds in their skin. I'm not sure exactly what that is, to straighten all the folds in the skin, what kind of cream that is, but it's I guess an anti-aging cream or something that they used to have that took away all the wrinkles.
Where is it, please? The place? The place.
The place. Someone please give the place.
66B2 on the second column, top of the second column.
Boy, Ravash has a question. When we say you have to give 10%, b'mana hanishim or b'mana hamiskabel? Remember, we had two amounts: the amount that she brought in, but the amount that he actually writes in the Kesuvos. She brought in 1,000, he writes 1,500. So you say 10%. Is it 10% of the 1,000 that she actually brought in? That's a mana hamiskabel, or b'mana hanishim, the 1,500, 10% of that, because that's what they assessed that's going to be worth. Which one is it? Im Tim Tzulayman, if you want to say it's Mana Hamas Kabul, the real money, the $1,000 she brought in. Yom Rishon, is this the first day? Or Kol Yom V'Yom, or every single day he has to give her again 10%. And Im Tim Tzulayman Kol Yom V'Yom, every single day he has to give her 10%. Shabbos Hashayna the first week, or Kol Shabbos every week. Im Tim Tzulayman Kol Shabbos every week. Chodesh Rishon only the first month of the marriage, or Kol Chodesh every month. And Im Tim Tzulayman Kol Chodesh every month. Shana the Shana only the first year when they married, so it's unique. We had in this parasha. I call Shana every year. Teiku. Tais is bewildered by the Gemara's question. He'll run out. If it's 10%, in 10 days, you run out basically. So what's Gemara even talking about? After you run out, then you have to give her whatever she needs according to whatever she needs. This is like in a fixed amount. Doesn't matter what she needs. You give her these 10 mana. So Tay said the Gemara's question basically is: do you give her one lump sum, or do you spread it out, whatever it is, as long as it takes? And then once you finish, there's no rule anymore how much you have to give her. You give her according to her dignity, according to her status. And that's my question basically: give her a lump sum, or you just spread it out. And the Gemara's wording it this way, but that's the Gemara's question. Says the Gemara further, like a super. Do you take it out one lump sum, but you just keep on drawing it down? In the amounts.
Is it nun alol? Is it nun alol?
Samach, where is it? Someone
Is
to
it
place,
nun alol?
please. Samach Vav.
66. 66.
66B2.
Samach Vav. Samach Vav.
Now the Gemara today and tomorrow, this beautiful Gemara all about tzedakah. Maisa, there's a story, and it's a very sad story, and we'll have tomorrow some more stories about her. The Bita Shel Nagdimah Ben Gurion, the daughter of Nagdimah Ben Gurion. We know Nagdimah Ben Gurion is one of the wealthiest people. We'll have a Gemara Gittin. There were 3 wealthy people in Yerushalayim that could have supported the entire community of Yerushalayim. And one of them was Nagdimah Ben Gurion, and he was a very generous person. But we'll soon see the Gemara is not happy. She was that wealthy, she was very wealthy. The Chachamim ruled for her that she should receive 400 gold coins, that she should have received 4 coins. What happened was her husband died, and so she went to Bezin to her husband died, and she was married now to brother. She went to Bezin to work out what her entitlements are. And so for one day, just for one day, because she's come from such a wealthy family, 400 gold coins. Amr Lahem, so she said back to them, now for the average person, it's an absolute fortune. But for her, she's such a wealthy person, she felt that they were being stingy on her account. So she said to them, Kach tifsiku livnei seichem. This is what should happen to your daughters. And they all answered Amen. Now you had the same thing yesterday. But yesterday it says in the Gemara they did not want to answer Amen because her husband died. She was married to her brother-in-law, and the Chachamim didn't want that the same thing should happen to them. So they refused to answer Amen.
She was a Yavama, no? She was a Yavama, I think we said.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. So the Chachamim didn't want to answer Amen because although the blessing she gave them partly was good, but the other part was that she, in her state, they didn't want to say Amen because you can't divide the bracha in half. And they didn't want their daughters to be Yavama. And here they did answer Amen. So first of all, from this Gemara we learn out, from yesterday's Gemara mainly, we learn out, it says in Sfarim, that if anybody gives you a bracha, you must answer Amen. And how do we know that? From the Gemara we learned yesterday, and today. Today they did answer Amen. Yesterday they didn't answer amen, they had to explain themselves why they did not answer amen. So an amen is even, it's not just on a bracha, but if somebody gives you personally a bracha, you must answer amen. Otherwise, it's a curse. Otherwise, it's a curse. So yesterday we talked about how much wine they gave her for cooking, and she gave them this bracha, and they did not answer amen. Why did they answer amen today? So Tosfos therefore learns as a result of that, because this is talking about that her husband was still alive, but they didn't know what the rule is, how much should she give. So they went to the bezdin. Oh, beautiful. But Rashi says the husband died. So it's very difficult to understand the difference between today's Gemara and yesterday's Gemara. Why yesterday they refused to answer amen, and today they didn't. So the difference, what Mepharshim want to say is that she did not marry her brother-in-law yet, and yesterday she was married to her brother-in-law. So is the problem that she's married to her brother-in-law, or the problem is that she lost her husband when she was young? So not exactly sure. How it's hard to understand Rashi, but Tosfos says clearly her husband's still alive. Anyway, let's continue. Torah we learned. Was running a donkey, but he was leaving Yerushalayim. He was escorted by his students. He saw this young woman. She was collecting barley between the dung, the excrement, the feces of animals, Arab animals, and she was there going about looking for some food, some barley. When she saw them, she covered her hair. I guess she was out alone there nowhere, and she was trying to go between the dung, so she removed whatever she was covering, she didn't get all dirty. But she stood up before them. She says to Rabbi Yechon Mazakai, I need some food. My daughter, who are you? She said, Bas Nagdim Ben Gurion. I am Nagdim Ben Gurion, the daughter of Nagdim Ben Gurion. Biti. So he said, my daughter, I don't understand. You came such a wealthy family. What happened to all that money? She says, there's a famous saying in Yerushalayim that Malach Mamoin Chaser. If you want to salt your money, you want to preserve your money, you want to make sure you're wealthy, Chaser, make sure that you give some of it up. Make sure you give tzedakah. If you give tzedakah, you will remain wealthy. And if you don't give tzedakah, you won't. Malach Mammon, Chaser. If you sold your money away, you want your money to be salted, Chaser. Make sure you reduce some of that money and give it to tzedakah. The Amila and others say Chesed. Give it not Chaser, but Chesed. Give it away as charity. So he said to him, what about your father-in-law? He's also a very wealthy man. She said, and he gave you a whole bunch of money for the wedding. She said, because we put the money together, we pulled the money together, my father's money came and ruined also my husband's money.
Where's the place there, please? Where's the place? What page?
Somebody please say.
66 B3.
7A1?
66 B3, second column.
She said, Rebbe, do you remember you were the one who signed my ksuvah? The Talmid of Rabbi Yechon Zaki turned around to his students and he said, Zachrani, I remember very well. When I signed on her ksuvah, but I read it, I couldn't believe it. 1 million golden coins. I mean, could you imagine what that's worth today? What it was worth then? 1 million gold coins. Chutz Michel Chaman. This is apart from what her husband brought in from his father, his parents, into the ksuvah. Absolute fortune. When Rabbi Yechon saw her plight, he couldn't help himself, but he cried. But he said, Ashreichem Yisrael, praiseworthy are the Yidden. Bisman she'oisin v'tzon when they do Hashem's will, ain't kol umah v'loshen she'letzes them. There's nobody who can actually exercise any influence over them, any control over them. But bisman she'ain oisin v'tzon makom, if they don't do the right thing, they don't give tzedakah, whatever it is, then moisin biad umah shveila, Hashem gives them over in the hand of a very poor nation, of a very downtrodden nation. V'loi biyad umah shveila. Not only in the hands of a downtrodden nation, these are the Arbaim, the Arabs. Look at that. She has to go now and scavenge whatever food she can find, even amongst animals. difficult to understand because we have in Margitin where it says there, we had other Gemaras, whoever starts over the Eden becomes a very powerful nation. The Rebbe should always make sure that when we Chas V'Shalom go Golas, we always end up with the more powerful nations. That's where we end up with Golas. And that's sort of to make life a little bit easier. And here we're saying that we end up beyond, I guess you're just talking about this particular circumstance. Saying, but I don't understand. Like, what are we talking about here? What do you mean, tzedakah? But Tanya, they said, he was such a charitable person. When he used to walk from his house to the Beis HaMedrash, they would put out all these linen mats in front of him. He shouldn't have to walk on the dirt. He shouldn't walk on the gravel. So he walked and it was very comfortable. And then what did they do with all of these linen carpets that they put out and rugs? Immediately after he walked on it, the poor would come, and they would take it right afterwards and take it home. In other words, he gave it away every day. He gave away all of these wonderful rugs. So the Gemara says, and that's no proof. Didn't think for 1 minute about the poor, he just did it for himself. Afterwards, it's worthless, so he gave it to them. Or, true, he gave a lot of tzedakah. For us, it would have been a substantial amount of tzedakah, but he was such a wealthy man, he should have given more. People say, depending on the size of the camel, that's the kind of load you put on him. So the richer you are, the more tzedakah we expect from you. Tanya, we learned. Let's finish this little part. I should see the consolation. I myself saw this daughter of Nagdim Megurian. She was collecting barley, the hooves of the horses in Aku. And I referred to her and I remind myself of this particular pasuk. It says, if you don't know the nice of the women, go follow the footsteps of the sheep, and go ahead and help graze your goats. Your goats, your bodies. Knows if you don't keep, the Hashem is saying basically, it's a mashal. If you don't keep my Torah and my mitzvahs, this is what the end is going to be. Like you yourselves are going to have to go like with the sheep going and to find food there in the pastures. Okay.